The application process varies from one place to another, but typically schools open up their application process about a year before the term actually starts. And that can vary based on whether the school has an early action policy or an early decision policy. Typically about 1 year before, about in August of the student's senior year, that's when the applications are typically open. And then there's usually an application fee. Some schools can waive the application fee. There's also transcripts need to be sent, test scores need to be sent, and it's important that the student sends updated scores from the transcript, GPAs, ACT scores, SAT scores, AP scores as they come in, so the school has the most up-to-date information. And then after that, typically it's just waiting on a decision. That can come on a rolling basis. So basically as soon as the institution processes the application, they can send a decision back to the student, or it can come at set dates, especially with an early action, early decision policy. And with the exception of the early decision programs, the student is really able to hold back their decision on where they're going to go until about May 1st. And some schools have a deposit and some schools don't. So it really just depends on the institution. The deposit can be anywhere from $100 to $500 depending on the school for the student to commit to go to that institution. Each school really defines early decision and early action in a different way. Early decision, though, is typically reserved, that the student typically applies for early decision programs to one institution. It indicates that the student is set on going to that institution. The early decision application date ranges really span from maybe August to early to mid-September, very early in the application process. And the school is really committing to get back to the student whether they're admitted based on the early decision program by early December, something like that. So it still leaves them some time to, if they're not accepted at that institution, to apply to other institutions. Early decision programs should not prevent a student from applying to many different institutions, although the student should only apply to one institution's early decision program, but can apply to many other institutions' early action programs, early or regular admission programs. And it's really just a way to, I guess, get a little more weight in the application process for the student. If a student that may perhaps not get in early, get in to an institution based on regular admission, could actually get in on early decision because of their exhibited interest in the school that they're applying to. Early action is a little bit different. It's really a school's motivation to the student to apply very early in the application process. That does not bind that student to attend that institution necessarily. It's a very non-obligatory process, and the student still has until May 1st to determine whether they're going to attend an institution or not. And May 1st is really kind of the accepted deadline of whether the student or when the student needs to notify the school that they're going to that institution. They don't have to wait until May 1st, but by May 1st, that's when a lot of institutions will require a decision, or else they may withdraw their admission decision. Some schools don't have confirmation deadlines, though. Some schools really just wait for you to sign up for orientation, and there is no application, or I'm sorry, their enrollment deposit at an institution. It just depends on the institution. Usually on the admissions website, we'll have a full write-up of what the specific application process and the application options are for that institution. There's quite a few of those. Well, one is the enrollment deposit that a school may or may not have. The other steps are really just lining up, living and going to school on that campus. So really, the first step is really to apply for housing. A lot of institutions have a separate application for housing where they can indicate housing preferences. Sometimes there is a housing deposit for an institution. Those can typically start in early fall as well, and some of those are first come, first served, so students really should apply very early to those housing options. Some housing options have full refunds, so there's a prepayment, but the institution can give the student a full refund if they choose not to come or decide to go to a different institution. But it's really just kind of trying to get through all those onboarding things very early in the process. Another one's application for scholarships. Students should always look to make sure there's an application for scholarships that may be separate or may not be separate from the application process. Some institutions keep their application for scholarships and their application for admissions in the same form, and some institutions keep that different. That there often is a separate deadline for scholarship applications, and sometimes there's several scholarship applications at an institution, especially for foundations or maybe for donated scholarships at the institution, and sometimes there's just one application for all the scholarships at an institution. Those are typically before Christmas of the student's senior year. So another part of the process would be submitting health documentation that a student's had certain vaccines, whether it be chickenpox or varicella or MMR or any of those specific immunizations that may be required to either live on campus or even go to school full-time on campus. And that again depends on the institution what immunization documentation is required. And those could be just forms, photocopy of health records. It could be signed statements from a doctor or a medical provider that a student will need to get to the either the health services division on the university campus or the college campus they're looking at going to, or to the admissions office that may control that process. Another step in the process would be signing up for orientation. Typically, orientation invitations go out sometime in early spring for the students that have been admitted to the institution, and those students can sign up for one of maybe 10, 15, 20 orientation sessions depending on the size of the school that the school may have that fall. And those are ways for a student to meet faculty on campus, meet other students, meet peer mentors that they may go to school with a little bit later, but also sign up for classes often as well during those orientation programs. Orientation varies quite a bit from institution to institution. Sometimes the orientation program is kind of a introduction to the culture of the campus, introduction to traditions on campus, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's just a way to meet students and faculty to kind of take care of those last minute things before the student actually starts school in the fall. Taking care of those nitpicky forms and those registration issues that may come up, any kind of housing finalization or finalizing documentation for housing or whatnot may be taken care of in the orientation process. But a great function of orientation is really to get introduced to the campus, for dining services to speak, for health services to speak, for campus safety to speak, and really kind of give the student a tangible feel of what life is going to be like on the campus in the fall semester. Maybe more so than a campus visit could have done, because it's a little more in-depth of a process. And a lot of it is getting to know some of the faculty members that represent the program that the student is interested in on the college campus. If a student's a physics major, to get introduced to the physics professors. So when they get to campus in the fall, they already feel like they're not a stranger on campus, because the professors are eager to get to know the students that are coming to the campus in the fall just as much as the students are excited to get to know the professors that are on campus in the fall. And a lot of peer groups are formed at that time as well. Most college campuses will have a student representative that can lead the new student around the campus for the orientation session. So they already have some kind of connection with that peer mentor, but also with the other students that were in their group when they came through the orientation session. Learning support programs that may be introduced during orientation. There's a lot of tutoring services that are introduced during orientation, library services, study resources. There's quite a few student activities that are introduced as well. Students will have to make the decision, do they want to participate in things like Greek life, if that's available on the college campus, or they want to participate in other maybe religious organizations or whatnot. And those organizations will have representation on the campus typically during an orientation session as well. Most students at a typical four-year school will live on campus. At a lot of four-year schools, there's actually a requirement to live on campus for the first year or even 2 years to make sure that the student gets a good, strong connection to the campus. And that's where the residence halls really do perform well, is to give each student a connection to the campus and connection to their peers while they're on the campus in the first year or two. If the student lives close to a college campus, oftentimes those requirements could be waived, especially in the four-year public institutions. Typically there's not enough housing to house every student that's going to that college, although some colleges do have that much housing. So it really just depends on the institution. A lot of colleges also have residence halls, residence programs, learning villages, residence colleges. There's a lot of different things that a college will call its residence hall programs that sometimes link the academic program with the social life of a student. For example, at Tennessee Tech, we have an environmental village where we couple with environmental or the College of or the Environmental Sciences program and couple some programs with the residence hall staff to perhaps do a cleanup activity at one of the state parks so the students feel like they're giving back to the community through their academic program. And we call those living and learning villages at Tennessee Tech. Very helpful way to, again, acquaint the student with the academic or the faculty side in different ways. We do have quite a few students who are very strong academically in one area but not academically strong in another area. It's very common for a student not to have great math skills, but they're really great in reading and English, and we understand that. So we do admit quite a few students who are prepared to do well at the institution but just need some help in one section or another. So the way we do that at Tennessee Tech University is we do additional instruction or supplemental instruction to each class. Say, for example, if a student struggled in writing skills, and the way a lot of four-year schools do this is if a student struggled in writing skills, then they would go to their regular college-level writing class, but they would have some supplemental instruction in a lab outside of class, maybe through the Learning Support Division, some tutoring outside of class. That is mandatory to help the student be successful and succeed at the college level. There's also the same with math courses, the same with reading courses, and there are some courses that we add to a student's curriculum. So say for example a student was required to take 120 hours, 120 credits to graduate. We perhaps may add a course to that to make sure the student gets started in the college level reading courses as fast as possible. So the student's very first semester, they'll take one additional course to make sure that the next course they take would be college level. We also, and they would be prepared for the college level course in the next semester. We also do quite a bit of testing. So if a student submits ACT scores or SAT scores, we know that's a time test, and that atmosphere can be very stressful. So we give the opportunity for students to test again before they enter the fall classes. That may be a better assessment of their performance and give them another option to maybe do some quick studying after high school graduation, study some specific skills, and then get a quicker start on their college curriculum, their college degree. A lot of institutions will require a student excuse me, let me start over. A lot of students can, a lot of institutions treat how students come into an academic program a little bit differently. Some institutions can allow a student to be undecided for a period of almost 2 years before they need to declare some major to graduate, whether that's a very general major to graduate with a Bachelor's of Science or Bachelor's of Arts degree from. Some colleges require a student to declare a major the very first semester that they attend the institution. Some colleges don't allow a student to declare a major for the first semester, and they have to be undecided or at least general studies for the first semester, and then they declare the next semester or the next year. It really just depends, but typically that orientation process is helpful in that process, and the campus visit process is also helpful in that when a student goes to visit the campus, they learn about those things when they meet with academic faculty on the campus or meet with an admissions counselor on the campus. That's usually explained in detail. There is typically every institution has a cadre of academic advisors that can help a student through those academic choices. Typically each college four-year degree program requires at least 120 hours of credit. What that means is it's typically in a four-year plan, typically 15 hours of course credit per semester for 8 semesters, taking the summers off. 15 hours per semester means about 15 hours of class meeting time per week for the whole semester, August to December, about 15, 16 weeks. And the academic advisor is going to help the student pick between the different courses that are available to fill up each one of those semesters to make sure they satisfy the requirements for a specific degree, to make sure they meet their enrollment or their college goals, college and career goals. Students change their major pretty often. It's very uncommon for a student not to change their major when they come to an institution. Somewhat because there's a lot of small tweaks that can be made to an academic program. You can add a minor, you can change the concentration in a major. For example, if a student comes in agribusiness and switches the major over to agritourism, something like that. It's a very small switch. That may just mean a switch of maybe 5 or 10 courses, but it is a major change. Then we have some students who come in dead set on maybe studying business, and they get into the courses and they feel that this is not the right fit for them, and they change over to maybe a sociology major, and that's very common and also not too difficult to deal with at the college level as well. It is very important to put a lot of thought in a student's academic major to make sure there's as few changes as possible because each major requires different courses to graduate as fast as possible or in that 4-year plan. It is important to make as few changes as possible. Although we have students that change their major 1, 2, even 3 times and still graduate in 4 years. Each program has a list of general education courses. In that general education collection of courses, there's a math, there's a speech, there's 2 English courses, there's 3 humanity courses, 3 social science courses, social behavioral science courses, and those apply to each major, although one major may require a certain math and another major may not be specific to what math a student takes. So the academic advisor can spend quite a bit of time with a student in their first semester to talk about what are the 3 or 4 or 5 thoughts that you've had about what you want to graduate with, and then they can say, well, these courses will best satisfy all of these. And then maybe your 3rd semester for that specific student, you're going to need to really lock down which classes or which course, which major the student wants to take, so the student doesn't start pursuing a major specifically that is going to lock them into one path. So after maybe three semesters, maybe 4, some say 4, depending on the curricula, students can have to start making some good decision on what their major is going to be before they start costing themselves some time and years after start costing themselves additional years in their bachelor's degree. When a student starts at an institution, typically they have available to them a list of majors. Each one of those majors has a prescribed set of courses that satisfy that major requirement. Each major, say one major may have 120 credit hours. Some majors may have 128, 132 credit hours. Some majors could have additional credit hours. But one major with 120 credit hours may have, say, 90 hours of prescribed courses, very specific courses that the student needs to take. And another major may have 120 hours out of the 120 hours of prescribed courses. So it really just depends on the major the student chooses. Your social sciences, maybe your softer sciences, would have a little more flexibility perhaps in what courses a student could take. Your hard sciences, physics, engineering, computer science, something like that, it's going to be a little bit more prescribed for what courses the student is able to take. So, but also courses can be substituted for each other. For example, if a student comes in to a college, takes a major that requires calculus, but then switches his major or her major over to perhaps a major that requires college algebra, then the institution can substitute that course for another course. So the student may not cost themselves a lot of time, and that's what the advisor is there to help navigate. The advisor can say, well, if you're thinking about engineering and you're thinking about computer science and you're thinking about sociology, well, maybe we can take Calculus 1, that would satisfy engineering and computer science, but if you decide to switch your major over to sociology, we can do a course substitution because we know that calculus counts for college algebra. So the advisor knows how to navigate those areas of interest to make sure the student gets out as fast as possible with their degree so they can go on to pursue their career goals or even go to grad school or something like that. So it really just, it means that the student needs a strong relationship with their advisor, their academic advisor. So we encourage all students that go to 4-year schools, any school really, to maintain constant contact with their academic advisor. Meet at least once per semester to make sure they're doing the right things, make sure their advisor is aware of what courses they're taking, and also of what their career aspirations are, to make sure that the academic advisor can help them navigate the college curricula as quickly and easily as possible. at an institution, at a four-year institution, typically there's sometimes a combination of professional advisors and faculty advisors and peer advisors that an institution will use to make sure the student gets all the attention they need and has all their questions answered about their program of study. A lot of institutions have a combination of professional and faculty advisors. The professional advisors are perhaps maybe in the College of Business at an institution. You'll have 5 or 6 or 1 or 2 or 8 or 10 different really staff. They don't teach courses, but they just spend their day meeting with students to make sure they have all their questions answered, and also to advise students on what courses to take. A lot of professional advisors nowadays have some responsibility to communicate with the students. If the student is not doing well in a course or not attending a course, a lot of times a professional advisor will reach out to the student to say, is everything okay? Is there anything we can help you with? Is this course not working out for you? Is there something we can do to help you with that? Not all colleges have that much that ability to do that, though, so it's very important for the student to just maintain constant contact with the advisors. Some institutions have maybe professional advisors for the first 2 years, and then we'll switch to a faculty advisor maybe the last 2 years. So the faculty advisor is the professor in the field of interest. Perhaps you have, if you're studying accounting at an institution, you have a professor that has a doctorate in accounting that may have even actually worked in the field that is very intimate with the career field after the student graduates, and even has some connections in the field after a student graduates. So the student can move from maybe I've got in the line to a certain area of interest. Now I've got the foundational courses under my belt. Now I need to get really specific, and that sometimes calls for a more specific advisor in one specific program, one specific major. When a professional advisor is really prepared and trained and able to advise across several different programs, a faculty advisor typically very specifically aligned to one program of study, one major perhaps, or a few majors anyway. Then we also have peer advisors as well at a four-year school. A lot of times a student will be assigned to another student either permanently or temporarily to help that student maybe navigate issues that they would be uncomfortable talking to a professional advisor or a faculty advisor about. For a student to be successful and progress academically through their program of study, one of the biggest things that we've seen at four-year schools is that students need to go to class. Students a lot of times think it's okay, since attendance is not taken into class, to miss a class. It is not okay to miss a class. A student really should go to every class, and if they miss a class, they need to be very adamant about following up with their peers or their professor to see what went on in that class. And it can't be a habit to miss a class. Missing a class should be a very rare exception. Another great way for the students to progress is to really communicate effectively. Don't be afraid to ask for help, to communicate with their academic advisor and the faculty or the professors that are in their classrooms regularly, to keep in touch with their campus email or whatever avenue the college uses to communicate with the student. A lot of colleges are still using email to communicate with the students. Facebook there are a few times that maybe Facebook posts are given out for general deadlines and payment deadlines and that sort of thing, but email can be used very strategically to pinpoint specific students that need specific things. So it's very important for a student to stay in touch with their email or whatever mode of communication the college has chosen. Get involved on campus. Be honest with you, a student that's happier on a college campus is more likely to progress academically. So getting involved in campus organizations, whether it be religious organizations or Greek organizations, or just getting involved in any kind of campus activities, fairs, bands, music events that play on campus is very important. Another part is to get to know your professors. The professors are often very interested in getting to know each individual student. I would say another one is probably don't work too much. It's very tempting for a student to work themselves through college. We really don't recommend, if a student's taking a full-time schedule, 15 hours of courses or so, we really don't recommend a student working more than 10 hours per week. And that sounds pretty strange to a student to say, well, I've got 15 hours of courses per week. Well, I can obviously do another 10 hours of work and fit that in very easily. What we have to remind students is that college classes typically pile up very quickly. And if a student is not able to walk away from all responsibility that they have with work and even some part with family, that they may not do as well, because the student that can do best academically is a student who is most flexible in their schedule. Maybe one week they have 0 exams, the next week they have 5 exams, and they need to be able to walk away from other responsibilities, or not really have a lot of other set responsibilities that they have to do to make sure they can commit more to their academics. A lot of it just comes down to balance, balancing healthy habits, make sure they eat right, make sure they go to class, make sure they have maybe a small work schedule, make sure they exercise regularly, sleep regularly. A lot of those things can really significantly affect a student's ability to progress through toward the degree. Four-year colleges offer a lot of the same services that many institutions do. Financial services, the business office and a financial aid office is there typically to help a student organize their aid or even personal expenses to pay for their program. A lot of colleges also offer learning support. In the two-year college, just quickly, learning support could mean those remedial and developmental supplemental instruction for those lower level courses. Learning support in the college, the four-year college level, is typically opportunities for undergraduate research, opportunities to get involved in the academia more than they could otherwise. Typically faculty sometimes sponsor undergraduate researchers to get involved in chemistry or physics or sociology more than they typically would without that faculty assistance. So when the student graduates with an undergraduate degree, they're pretty quickly fed into a graduate program if that's what their interest is. Other support services, really counseling services we have on campus for students that have trouble, maybe their parents go through a divorce or they have an eating disorder or they are having depression issues or whatnot. They can always go to the counseling center to talk about those problems, and the counseling center can help them or at least refer them accordingly. Disability services, we have a lot of students with disabilities on our campuses nowadays, and sometimes they need additional time to take a test, or sometimes they need a quiet room to take a test in, that sort of thing. So we work with students individually at the four-year schools to make sure they have the accommodations necessary to do well in their courses. The biggest problems that we see in students that come to college that may prevent them from succeeding is really just a conflict of commitment. A lot of students think that they have to work while they're in college, or maybe they have family obligations while they're in college, and I think a student needs to work very hard to make sure their college experience is a very undistracted, if that's a word, experience. Typically that's a hard pill to swallow for a student's family. It's a hard pill to swallow for the student when typically they're used to living maybe in a little higher standard of living with a job that they've been able to keep up and work pretty regularly while they're in high school. In college just acts much differently. So we really see the students that are successful are the students that have families that understand that the student is going to be away and committed to something else for quite a bit of time. And also students that are prepared to sacrifice financially and not overcommit themselves to work or another job, whatnot, when they should be committing themselves to their academics. It's very easy for a student to say yes to go to their job and skip one class, but then again that may happen again and again, or the student just may skip one class and not be able to catch up in that class if it's a very difficult class. So we typically talk with students before they come to college and really encourage them to think about counting the cost of what college is going to be, to make sure they set themselves up for a very non-distracted time while they're in college. We have a lot of students who will not work at all while they're in college, but will work full-time in the summer and over Christmas to make sure they have enough spending money for their college degree. We talk about opportunity cost. If a student works a full-time job while they're in college and that prevents them from being as successful or graduating as quickly, just 1 year of not earning that bachelor's degree can cost them quite a bit in opportunity cost. each year that a student doesn't earn a degree, they're costing themselves anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 in opportunity cost for a degree. And that can certainly add up, and it's a lot more than a minimum wage job can provide. So we really encourage students to think about that when they enroll in college and make sure they can graduate as fast as possible. We've reframed in the college, in the four-year college arena, we've reframed the graduation rate back to 4 years. For several years, it was okay for students to take 5, 6 years to graduate. We don't think that's okay. There's 120 hours in a degree program. That's 15 hours, which is a full-time schedule for 4 years. A student can graduate on time. So that's what we push for at the four-year college, is the student graduate in 4 years and not in 5 or 6. Because it's best for the student and best for us.